Hi guys, it's April, and since it is the end of the month, or it is already past the end of the month, it's time for my end of month wrap up. That was a very convoluted statement, just to say that this is all the rest of the books that I read in April. So I have already done a mid-month wrap-up, so I will link that down below and up above, just in case you want to check out the books that I read for the first half of April. So for my stats for this month, for the last 2 weeks, I managed to read 9 books, bringing my monthly total up to 17 books, bringing my yearly total to 55 books that I have read so far in 2019. I am well on my way of achieving my goal of 130 books. The 9 books that I read in the last 2 weeks totals at 4,086, which brings my monthly total to 6,010 pages and the yearly total to 19,174 pages so far. On average, I'm reading around 160 pages a day, which equates to me reading a book every 2 days. And I did continue on in my trend of reading a lot of electronic books for the rest of this month. So the first book that I read for this last half of the month was West of the Moon, East of the Sun by KnifeEdge. This is actually a Buffy fanfiction that is based off of East of the Sun, West of the Moon. I know a lot of people won't consider this kind of read in their yearly total or even talk to you guys about it, but this thing is epic. It's a very, very, very long story, and I have read it multiple times. It's one of those ones that every once in a while I get a craving to go back and read it. So well done. I love it so much. So yes, just take East of the Sun, West of the Moon, throw in some Buffyverse, and that is what this story is, and I kind of like it, and I have no shame in my reading taste. The next thing that I picked up was The Nightmare Before Christmas, Zero's Journey. This is the volume 0, so this is the precursor to the Zero's Journeys comic books. I got this as a free read on Amazon. Just wanted to check it out, wanted to check out the art styles and things like that. This doesn't really give you a lot to go off of. It's just a tiny little teaser. It didn't really give me enough of the story to judge what all of it is going to be. I did like the art. Not 100% sure that it really grabbed me, but I do love the Nightmare Before Christmas universe, so maybe it's something that'll happen. I also picked up Battle Angel Alita Volume 1. This is the manga graphic novel that Alita is based off of. I decided to give it a try. Decided that it is in no way up my alley. It is a very battle-oriented, gore-oriented story, and it just wasn't really what I wanted. It was very well done, but I don't think it runs in the vein of my taste. I liked the art. I did like the steampunk-esque aspect of the whole thing, and I did like how it was set in the future and what it's trying to do. I just couldn't really bring myself to spend too long in the battle scenes. I also picked up Days of Blood and Starlight and Dreams of God and Monsters by Laini Taylor. This is book 2 and 3 of the Daughters of Smoke and Bone series. It continues on in the battle between angels and monsters and everything that entails. Laini Taylor did an amazing job writing this series. There were points where I had so much anxiety and I really wanted to yell at these characters, but then somehow the story just pulled me back and I was addicted to it and I couldn't stop reading it, even though part of me is like, why am I putting myself through this stress? Because the story itself is amazing in a way that you feel very, very connected to a lot of these characters, even though some of them are really, really stupid, really. And I will note that I did read Strange the Dreamer before I even picked up this series, so it's nice to see some of the origin of the things going on in Strange the Dreamer. I didn't realize how connected they were, but they are, and it's kind of fun to see. And I will also note that in this series, Daughter of Smoke and Bone series, there is probably one of my all-time favorite characters, and that's Zuzana. So I will be reading the novella that is centered around her because she is just my tiny little spirit animal. And for the book club book pick of the month for Shae and Mai's book club, Tell It Again, we picked The Cold Is in Her Bones by Peternelle von Arsdale. We have a live show It's filled with spoilers, but I will link that up above and down below to get more of our thoughts on this story. This is a story of Milla, who grows up in a very suppressed household when all of a sudden one day this girl named Iris comes and lives with her and her family, and she starts to learn some of the things that are going on in the village near her. This is a Medusa origin story inspired read. It takes a lot of the Medusa elements, it weaves it into this story that is all about friendship and love and being who you are and not being afraid of being that. There are a lot of things that are done very well in this book. It is very dark, it is very moody, and I love it for that, and I love seeing all of the little elements of Medusa, but the character development wasn't where I expected it to be. A lot of times the characters would flip in ways that didn't make sense, and then there were some elements in the story that I don't think necessarily helped it and probably could have been altered in a way that made more sense to move the story along. It did a lot of things well, it did some things not so well, and I'd be interested to see what this author does next. I then finally picked up Elantris by Brandon Sanderson, and oh my gosh, this is supposedly a start of a series. It hasn't gotten any more of the books in the series, but I think it does okay as a standalone. This is the story of Serene, who has been engaged to a prince of Arelon, who shows up only to be told that her future husband has died. This is her story as she dives deeper into the politics that are happening, trying to discover what really happened to her husband, at the same time becoming very connected to the people of the city and realizing that there are some other people who are seeking to take over and possibly destroy everything that she's starting to make connections with. I really like this story. I didn't expect that I would. I know there are some talks about this being a really slow read. I enjoyed it. I liked the pacing. I liked where it went. I did kind of see where a lot of it was going, but I still enjoyed the interactions that happened between characters and just seeing the beginnings of Sanderson and what all he was starting to put together. I really like this book. Yes, that's all I'm gonna say. I also picked up My Lady Jane, and thank you guys for all of you who suggested that I still read this book, because you were totally right. This was way better than My Plain Jane. I loved My Plain Jane, but My Lady Jane was absolutely amazing. The snark and the wit and everything else that happens in this book, the dynamic between the characters and the conversations that happen, I absolutely loved. It was just one of those quick, quirky reads that I needed. Yes, it is a retelling of Lady Jane Grey, who only sat on the throne of England for about 9 days, and she was not that old at all. This takes that part of history and it kind of throws it up against the wall, paints it a little bit, and then walks away and lets it just kind of slide off. That is the best way I have to describe what this story is. It takes some liberty with history. It throws in the fact that maybe there are a group of people who can randomly turn themselves into animals, and maybe Mary coming to the throne didn't quite go the way we thought it would. And I liked it. I liked it a lot. I think I am forever a fan of this Jane series. And last but not least, I read the very boring book of Jobs to Be Done. Very boring book. This is a book for my work book club. It was my suggestion, and I kind of regret suggesting it. I was hoping it would be more than what it was. It's a lot of framework on how to develop new products and things like that. There was just a lot of elements missing in it that I wanted explained more that just kind of gets glossed over. A good chunk of this book is just explaining about how awesome this theology and this methodology is without actually explaining it, and then the explanation part is maybe 20 pages, and then you got a lot of case studies, but at the same time I'm like, but there's still a certain point where you're talking about you need to get to a certain point before you start implementing all of these things, and you're saying a lot of the things to get you to this point are invalid, so how do you get to this point? Explain to me how you get to this point. And that's mainly my biggest failing of this book, at least as I interpreted this book. And I have to say, I am not a huge fan of people putting together case studies and saying there is this very high percentage success rate when the number is biased because the pool that they're pulling from isn't very big in the first place. So, yes. And with that, those are all the books that I read in the last half of April. Tell me down below what you are most excited about for May, because May is my birthday month and I'm super, super excited because it's my birthday month. Have I mentioned that it's my birthday month? So tell me down below what your favorite thing about May is, and I heart your beautiful faces.